Welcome to another exciting and informative episode of the Entreprenudist Podcast, a place to hear real entrepreneurs and business owners bear it all. I'm your host, Randolph Love III, and we do have another entrepreneur on the podcast today. But before we bring them on, I want to remind you that this episode is brought to you by Shield Wolf Strongholds, a wealth growth and protection company when it comes to employee benefits, estate planning, retirement planning, life insurance. If your plan ain't Shield Wolf, your plan ain't strong. If you want to retire higher than you would have prior, make sure you would visit www.shieldwolfstrong.com. Now to our guest, Sonny Grappone, the founder and owner of Precision Accounting and Consulting. Sonny is a seasoned expert in financial management and strategic business consulting, specializing in providing outsourced CFO services to help companies grow and thrive. With his extensive experience in helping businesses streamline their finances, improve profitability, and making informed decisions. Sonny, welcome to the Entreprenudist Podcast.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be on.
Absolutely. How long have you been doing what you're doing now?
I've owned my business now for, I would say, going on a little over 5 years now. I've been in the accounting space for over, it's going close to 13, 14 years now. I started my journey as a blue-collar worker. I went to school very late. I went to school in my teens. My teens. I didn't go to school in my teens. I went back to school at the age of 26. Before that, I was always a blue-collar worker, working in construction, food industry. I had my own business as an auto detailer and body shop that I had for many years. I talked about this before on other podcasts. I feel like I'm just speaking for me, but more specifically the adult male. You don't really know what you want until I felt I was the age of 25, and they've done studies on it, and I feel like your brain does not mature until you're the age of 25, where you actually have a clear mindset of what you want to do. There's some people that are just born with it where they know, from the age of, 12 or whatever, that they know they want to do this. But majority of people out there really don't know, and I had to go through life experience and hurdles, to learn and make mistakes and all that fun stuff to kind of bring me to where I am today, and it was all worth it. Now I own a successful business. I have a beautiful wife and two beautiful kids. I own a home, and I have my health, and there's nothing more I can ask for, but I have to say, 10 years ago or 15 years ago, I didn't think this was all possible, but I took an investment and a chance on myself, and it paid dividends, and now I help advise anywhere from people doing 5 million to, 30, 40 million. I have some guys that have $100 million worth in assets where I help advise them on, how to utilize their cash correctly and how to utilize their profits and grow their business efficiently.
Everybody loves omelets, right? But in order to make that omelet, you did have to break a few eggs. It sounds like 15 years later, you have a beautiful omelet based off those eggs that you are willing to buy and crack along the journey.
100%. Yeah, 100%, and and I have a few people to owe that to, one being my mother, right? My mother came from a third world country, Guyana. So Guyana is in South America, right? Next, a little country next to Brazil. She came, a lot of people don't know where Guyana is, so that's why I explain it. It's not like Brazil, where everybody, you hear Brazil and Guyana is not a country that's really well known. It's, its only fame to glory is Jim Jones. I don't know if you remember Jim Jones from back in the 80s. They had that cult, and they created this whole mass suicide down in Guyana, and that was the only thing people knew Guyana from. So It's a West Indian, type of background, Caribbean type of area, but it was a third world country, very poor. And my mother had left that country at the age of 16 years old, came to America with nothing, had my sister a year later at a very young age at 17, and then had me a few years later. And she basically lived the American dream. She was able to get a job. At first she was at a warehouse, and, she went through her trials and tribulations, and then she was able to land a job at the supermarket where she worked her way up through the corporate ladder there. And she was able to be their bookkeeper there for about, she worked there for 40 years, and back then in the 90s, right, you were able to work at like a supermarket, a Home Depot, Kmart, or any of these places and earn a sustainable living wage. And that went a long way. You were able to buy a house. You were able to, provide for your family. It went a long way. I remember, when my mom finally earned enough money in her wages where she got raises, and was able to earn a sustainable living wage. I really didn't want for much. I grew up poor in the beginning. I shared a bed with my mom and my sister till like I was the age of 11. I grew up in Queens, New York, in a one-room apartment. But then when my mom finally met that plateau and worked hard and sacrificed everything, she met my stepfather, and they worked at the same company. My stepfather, who I pretty much allude to as my father. He was a manager at the store, and they got married, and they were able to move us out and buy a house out in Long Island, New York. And Long Island, New York is one of the most, probably next to California, probably one of the most expensive areas to live in the United States, taxes wise. And she was able to do that just from working for the supermarket. And when we came out to Long Island, I was like in heaven. I had my own room, and this was this was foreign to me, and then after that, from the age of like 11, 12, I didn't want or need for a thing. My mother was able to provide for that. And on top of that, she was able to instill in me a work ethic that I still carry with me today. They had me working from the age of 12 years old. I was bagging groceries at their supermarket. Used to bag the groceries for people, and you put a little tip jar out there, and I would come home with like $75 in a day. Back then in the 90s, that was a lot of money, and and it just developed. When I got that taste of earning my own money, I wanted more, and from the day I could actually work a real job, I was able to do that. And I always had a side hustle. I was building computers. When I started getting into computers, I had an knack for cars, so I turned that into a whole business. I had little ventures spread out all over the place. And, my mother's dream was for me to go back to school. And, education was very big in our household. And as a kid, I rebelled. I hated education. I hated high school. I didn't want anything to do with it. I wanted to party and have fun and, make all these mistakes. And finally, after, too much time of doing that, I called it quits. And I saw my peers passing me by, and, I had to take a hard look at myself and see what I wanted to do with my life. And the detailing business that I had, the auto detailing business I had, and the auto body was doing really well. I was able to buy my own truck. I had, multiple clients. I had my own shop. But I had some wear and tear in my body just from doing it for a number of years. And I remember going to the doctor and him telling me I had pulled something in my knee. And I remember him telling me, listen, if you're going to go down this route of this type of work, by the age of 40, 45, you're going to have a lot of problems, because work, it's demanding, just the way you have to do certain things. And, so I took a hard look at myself, and I decided to go back to school and start from scratch. And I moved back home. That was a big, big move for me. I always lived on my own from 18 on, and then I moved back home at 26. And I went back to school, and I stayed in an 8x8 room in my old house. I sacrificed. I worked 2 jobs while going to school for about 5 years. And and I finally got my first job out of accounting. And I decided to go with accounting just because and this is just advice to people that are looking for their passion or to know what they would like in the future. For me, accounting was one of the only things that kept me present. It kept me out of my head, and it kept me focused and present in the moment, And just speaking for me, it's very hard to find those things, in this crazy world we live in, right? We're always, either, thinking ahead or thinking behind us, to stay present and truly, that takes a special skill. That's why they said I was actually watching the other day. I'm a big basketball guy. I was rewatching Last Dance, with Michael Jordan, and they said what made Michael Jordan so great is his ability to stay present and forget everything. He was all about staying present in the moment. That's why him and Phil Jackson, the Zen master, right? They were always about, kind of staying present, meditating and being there. So like accounting was that for me. Like I was able to there was something about it that I loved. And I like the balance of things, right? If it happens on this side, it has to happen on this side, right? And it's not more so math. Everybody thinks math. It's a puzzle, and problem solving. So I found an knack for it. And when I got out of school, I worked corporate for a number of years. I got some jobs and experience. And I worked in New York City and Manhattan at the World Trade Center, and with some other firms. And I got tired of making other people money, especially after working for myself, and working in corporate is a different beast. It is a different beast. I remember I used to walk into, you would have these monthly meetings, where you would have to answer to high executives. And I remember the week before I would have ulcers in my stomach just because of how much pressure they put on you. And I remember asking myself, can I do this for the rest of my life? And I remember I told my wife that, I'm thinking about quitting my job. And I was even going to switch careers at that point because I didn't know if I could deal with the pressure. And it sounds crazy, but I didn't know if it was for me. And we had just bought our house, right? We were like 6 months into buying our house, and I had no idea what I was going to do. And my wife, my rock, she supported me whatever I wanted to do. And luckily, a guy that I consulted for reached out to me, and he said, listen, why don't you come work for me? I've always wanted you to come. I love your skill set. And I would love to have you, but I can't pay you what you were making out and working in the city. So I thought about it, and I did it. I took less money for my sanity. I came back to Long Island, and it was the best thing and best choice I ever made because I did so well working for this gentleman. It's a small business where we handle accounting for small businesses as opposed to corporate accounting. And I learned more working in this field than I ever did in corporate. And I was able to, my boss, who is now my partner, he put it out there for all of us to say, listen, it's here for the taking. If you bring in enough business, I will make it worth your while. I'll make you a partner, or we'll think of something. And I brought in enough business in 2 years where I was able to dictate, where I came to him and said, listen, I want to call the shots in my own destiny, and I want you to come in partner in my own consulting business that I've always had. And if you say no, well, I'm going to go out on my own. And he decided not to, and he became partners with me. And the rest was history, man. And 3 years later, here I am now, and serving as an outsourced CFO for all types of businesses. We mainly work a lot, though, with construction companies, helping them out with their finances and helping them reach profit levels so they can sustain and move forward with their projects. And real estate developers, we're in a lot of niches, but now work is not work. I say that to everybody. The weekends aren't the weekends to me. Every day is a weekend for me,
Man, they say you do what you love. You never have to work a day in your life. And you specifically mentioned construction companies. So if somebody is looking for an outsourced CFO, some people even call it a fractional CFO. Do you like that term? Are those words synonymous or what?
Yeah, of course. Yes. I think it's funny because people don't know what they need, right? They say they need a CFO. I had a gentleman sign me on as a CFO 6 months ago, a law firm, and he just needed me to do his 401k and administer his benefits, do the calculation for his benefits for his employees, and also advise him on some accounting. And he called that a CFO. That's a CFO. We determined that, but so yeah, I do like being called a CFO, but I like to give people an education on what that actually is and what you're actually paying for.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And it's good to know what you're paying for, and it's good to have a CFO on your roster. Can any CFO work for any industry? And I'm sure they can, but is it advised to be with a CFO that doesn't necessarily specialize in what you do?
Yeah, I mean, this is a niche industry, right? You get scared, right? Like, I didn't want to limit myself to construction, but that was my background too, and I like it a lot, and there's a lot of opportunity there. But then you get afraid and say, well, I'm leaving all the rest out on the table, right? So you kind of have to be wary of that and market yourself as, yes, this is my niche, but I can adapt to any environment, right? And I will say this: people that hire a CFO or say a controller, right? That's another, like, right below a CFO, right? Or an accountant, whatever you want to phrase it. Know who you're appealing to, right? When you hire a CFO, know exactly what you're requiring of that CFO and if he has that skill set. Because I will say this: I work as an outsourced CFO for other companies, but I've also worked with other CFOs. Like, other CFOs hire us. Well, they'll hire me to manage an accounting team. They'll say, listen, I don't want to hire internally, right? Because it will end up costing them, say, $300,000, $400,000 to hire an internal accounting team, right? Between benefits, salary, you need two accountants, a person that pays your bills, people that do collections for you. When it's all said and done, that could run you upward 200, 400K easily. So what CFOs will do is say, listen, I want to hire you, and you hire your own accounting team, and you manage it for me. And they know it's going to be cheaper. We'll probably come in at half the price, right? When I worked for these CFOs, I would say maybe maybe 2 or 3 out of every 10 are actual CFOs. All right. And what they do is they're like glorified controllers or glorified accountants, not CFOs. And what they do is they go from place to place, right? And because what happens is, once they call themselves a CFO, or they put it in their email signature, right? Or once they get that role, there's no taking it back. Right? Nobody's taking that role from them. So they go from place to place until they get called out or found out on, right? And they'll go to place and say, after a year, their people realize this guy's not really doing what he says he's doing, or he's not a CFO, right? That guy will go to the next place, get hired at the next place, and he'll say, you can't contact my previous employer because they don't know I'm going to look for another job, so please don't do that. And they just rinse, recycle, and repeat. And I meet so many guys like this, and I'm amazed at it, because nobody does their homework. I know what a CFO is for me, where, like, I'm not doing the accounting. I'm having a team doing my accounting. I'm looking at everything from a high level standpoint and helping you manage your finances, your operations, looking what do you have to do to reach, break even or profit levels, right? In order to sustain your business and grow and expand, or whatever your goals may be. I'm not doing QuickBooks work or journal entry works. I'm advising you on a weekly to monthly basis on how to grow your business to keep your business financially viable.
Oh, yeah. Definitely. And a lot of times when you're working in your business, you need somebody from the outside looking in to have those conversations with you. What would you say are some of the biggest tax deductions and credits that a contractor might commonly miss?
I wouldn't isolate it to a contractor, because a contractor, realtor, lawyer, they can all go pretty much for the same thing. I mean, there's not one they kind of like one size fits all in business. I could say that, right? Yeah. So one of them is, depending on the state that you're in, right? There's, it also depends on your corporate formation, right? If you have an own business, you have to choose a C corp, right? An S corp, a partnership, right? There's tax advantages to each type of formation. So it all depends on what type of formation you are. But, we usually advise people on an S corp a lot of the times, because what you can do on an S corp, right, is you could put yourself on payroll, right? So you can hire like an ADP and pay yourself like you would pay a W-2 employee, but you're paying yourself. But what happens is you get to also write that expense of paying you through your business. So you get to write that off through the business, right? And through an S corp, they have this in New York and other states, a lot of other states, they have a election called the pass-through entity tax. And what the pass-through entity tax is it allows you to pay your state income tax through the business, right? So just some education, and I'm going to dumb it down a little bit, right? So if you're an S corp, for an example, right? The difference between an S corp and a C corp, the C corp, you pay your tax through the corporate level, through the corporate business. Through an S corp, the profit of the business passes through the individual. So me, I have an S corp, right? I pay my taxes on my profit of my business on my individual return with my wife, right? So that profit gets passed down to me, and I pay it through the individual, my individual return, right? So me, the individual, is responsible for paying state income tax, okay? I can pay now that state income tax through my business, okay, and get a huge write-off at the end of the year, depending on what my state income tax level is. I've done it for some businesses, and they've been able to write off $50,000. I've done one. We did one a few months ago. We ended up saving $125,000 at the end of the year. So that's a huge write-off. The other one is that we're very passionate about is wellness programs. Okay, a wellness program, if you're a contractor or you're someone that owns your own business, right, and you have over 25 full-time employees, okay, you can sign up your employees for a wellness program. Now, a wellness program is like a health package that you give to your employees if they choose to work at your place, where they get a gym membership through a wellness program. Basically, the gym membership is paid for. You get mental health counseling, substance abuse counseling, that type of stuff through this wellness program. You get medical concierge, right? Meaning, like, if you, God forbid, you got cancer, right, and you're a single guy and you don't know what questions to ask, they'll provide someone with you to go on the doctor visits and act as your intermediary, so you can ask the right questions and be well educated. They have preventative measures where you can take preventative tests to like prevent diabetes and heart disease. To do these tests, that's what comes with these wellness programs. The reason for it is the government wants to incentivize employees to stay healthy. If they incentivize employees to stay healthy, what does that do? That lowers health insurance costs, right, for the insurance companies and the government, and it leads to more happy employers, right? And it ends up lowering costs for everybody. So what it does is the government says is you get your employees to act in this wellness program, will allow you to use that as a pre-taxed stipend on your wages, right? So that's like a 401k, right? And all these pre-tax AFLAC, all these pre-tax incentives that you're able to do in order to lower your taxable wages. That's why people, contribute to these things. One, for retirement, but two, it lowers your W-2 wages also, on your tax at a different rate. This is the same thing, but it offers a lot bigger pre-tax incentive. So, for example, we just did a physical therapist that we implemented this wellness program for him. On each employee, he was able to save $600 per employee per month. So he had over 54 employees. So imagine that, $600 per employee per month he was able to save. So the savings ended up being upwards in the $50,000, $60,000 range, and everybody loves it because the employee gets great benefits included with their health benefits, and then the employer owner now pays less FICA taxes on the employee version that he owes every quarter. He has to pay taxes on the employee. So this lowers it dramatically. So these are the type of tax savings that we kind of look for. And this isn't like an obvious thing. We do our research and like we, dive through the tax code to see, if you're in this state and you have this type of industry and you have this many employees, what can we do for this guy? So it takes a lot of work, but but at the end of the day, we always end up saving people more than we're charging them. And that's our goal.
Oh yeah. You definitely want somebody to be able to look back in their books and say, all right, I paid Sonny this much, but I can track it back to him saving me this much. And just like you said at the top of the call, your role, you're looking at things 30,000 feet above, not necessarily implementing. When you do share with somebody this information, such as a wellness program, and I imagine it requires getting somebody with some sort of license to help them get it going. How do you determine? And I'm also imagining when these business owners hear you talk, is probably close to being the voice of God for them. So you have a lot of influence on the decisions that they make and who they make those decisions with. How do you determine who to recommend, or do you just advise and let them find who to work with to implement?
So I have certain providers that I work with, and I've taken a lot of time to develop those relationships. When I heard about this wellness so what happened was we did a lot of employee retention credits for a lot of clients. I don't know if you've ever heard of ERC. It was a big tax credit that you must have heard of it. They talked about it through COVID, right? Yes. And it was a lot of fraud that went on with ERC also. A lot of scammers going out there and applying for businesses that weren't entitled to it. And it was terrible because they put these poor people that own these businesses at risk, qualifying them for a tax credit. And if the IRS came back and audited you, you were screwed. You owed all that money back, or they penalized you. So we were advising people, one, did you really qualify, right? And if you did, okay, let's do it the right way. And we turned away just as many people as we accepted for that program. But after that, a lot of people ended up spending all that money. Like we had a farm that we ended up getting $7.7 million in ERC tax credits for. Some places $4 million. And some of them, adjusted well, but a lot of them spent all that money. So people would come to us after and be like, what other tax credits are there out for us? So we started looking, and I started seeing, and I started looking up wellness programs, and I started saying, what's a good tax initiative, for these people that can adapt and fit all sizes. And listen, not everybody's 25 employees or more, so that's the caveat that you have to look for, right? But I looked it up and I saw this wellness program, and I started interviewing different providers. I'm like, who implements this? I'm an accountant. I can't implement this. And I want to learn more about the program so I know what I'm talking about too. So I interviewed probably half a dozen providers, and I actually went through 2 or 3 providers that I actually signed up with. And and I'll admit it because that's how I learned, through our mistakes, right? And I signed up with 2 or 3 providers. A couple of them, I did not like the way they onboarded my clients. It was broken promises from the get-go. And finally, I found a great provider that I've been with them now for about, I would say, a little over a year now. They're called EHP, okay? And they're a great provider for benefits, health insurance, stuff like that, but more so wellness programs. And now we've been working for them for over a year. So when I come to a client, I make these suggestions. Normally when we do this, it's a tax plan, right? A lot of business owners and high net worth individuals come to us and say, I want to pay less taxes. I just got a call from that physical therapist that I was just telling you about. He's an accounting client. He's like, I have $500,000 in profit right now. It's end of the year. What am I going to do? I need to, figure out a way to lower my tax burden. How much money should I be spending? And I went through it with him. Any vendors that you can pay off, before December 31st, pay them off, right? Any bonuses, anything like that, get that through this year, like anything he could, and we signed them up for the wellness program too. But everybody always comes to us with that mentality. Tax time's coming. I'm going to owe money. What can I do to save? And when they come to us, we build a tax plan. That's a separate service, but it's very informative and it's very worth it. And that's one of the tax implementations that we'll make is the wellness program. AFLAC is another great one, a pre-tax incentive. We'll also, HSAs. HSAs are huge, right? HSAs, health savings account, right? Where you put away money pre-tax, for health reimbursements, for like, say, if you go to CVS, Amazon, all that stuff qualifies as, health savings account where you can get reimbursed. But the caveat is that you could put up to $8,000 in a health savings account that you can end up contributing pre-tax to your paycheck that will lower your wages and help you on the getting taxed at a lesser rate. So these are the type of things that we're looking for in the tax plan along with the wellness plan. And we'll have different providers in each of those fields. Like I have an AFLAC guy, a wellness guy, any other HSA, we'll have a health benefits guy that will come in and assess your needs and pick out the right HSA, or it may not be an HSA. It might be a different health savings account that you may qualify for that might be better, that might give you more better tax benefits. It's that type of things that we're looking for in our partners.
Oh, yeah. It's good to have friends who have friends, especially people that's willing to go through the process in order to make sure that they're helping their customers the best. I'm a registered pre-licensing and continuing education instructor. And one thing that I used to do voluntarily is take the exams again, even pay out of my pocket just to make sure that I was up to date on how they're asking these questions, if they're changing things. And it made me a better instructor. And it sounds like for you, what makes you a better advisor is actually putting your money where your mouth is and checking it out first before you make your clients look into it.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I always come with the mentality, right? Like, especially when you get an accountant. What do you think of an accountant when someone mentions an accountant, right? Like taxes or like an expense, right? I don't want to pay an account, right? I'm not an expense. I'm an investment. Right? Plain and simple. Stop looking at me like an expense. I am an investment. I'm here to make you more money than I am charging you right now. Right. And like I said before, that's the mentality that I have to bring. And I have to separate myself from your average, H&R Block or, RG and Brenner, Jackson Hewitt. And I'm not associated with any of those. I don't do that type of work. I don't do individual tax returns. I do individual tax returns, but for friends and family. We are strictly working with business owners and, doing accounting and fractional CFO work for these businesses. But in order to separate myself from those CPA shops, I have to bring some value. And my value is that I have to go outside the box of accounting, and find different avenues that can help my clients, other than, saying, cut this expense, like that's all great. And believe me, I find the cracks everywhere, but, the more well-rounded I can be, the more I can serve my clients. And like you said, they have a certain type of trust that I have to earn with them, more so. And that's why I choose who I work with very closely, because they are an extension of me. Right? If you do bad work for this client, that's going to fall back on me and make me look bad. I found through the pandemic, right? And the pandemic changed a lot of things, but one of the things that it did was I found that we made more money working together than against each other, right? Like, because now the pie got so much bigger after COVID, right? When I was working in accounting, all I worked with was New York clients. Right? Everything was face to face. You went in for meetings, like you to think of getting a client outside of New York was like crazy. Then all of a sudden COVID opened the doors and the floodgates happened. And now I can work remotely with clients from California, Chicago, Seattle, Florida, you name it. And now all of a sudden my business is just like the reach has just expanded tenfold. And I'm like, this is crazy. And I have more clients now outside of New York than I do in New York, which I would never even think, and I made all those connections through all the different alliances that I made, throughout the pandemic that I connected with, like my wellness providers, right? My health insurance guys, my worker compensation guys. Like, these are all guys that we work together and we feed each other business too at the same time, but we also make sure we add value, for our clients, and I like to be that one-stop hub in my accounting firm, meaning that when you come to me, I'm going to have an insurance guy for you. I'm going to have a workers' compensation. I'm going to have a lawyer for you. I'm going to have a health insurance guy for you. Everything's going to flow through me, and the buck's going to stop here. Because the one thing business owners can't stand is their time is very precious to them, and it's very limited. So if you can manage that to make their time where they are not dealing with any of that other stuff and they can focus on making money, you have just added your value tenfold. So that's what I do for my business owners, is that, like, all right, you need this, you need that, you need X, Y, and Z. Don't worry. I built that trust with you. I've got it. I'll direct you towards the right guys. I'll take care of everything. I'll explain it to you. Just sign on the bottom line, and I'll tell you how much money you're saving. And if you don't want to do it, you don't have to do it. I will explain it all, but more than likely, they end up, signing with the guy that I recommend.
Oh, yeah. With great power comes great responsibility. And that is a very influential position that you have there. So is it one of those things to where you adjust to your business owners' habits, or do your business owners adjust to your standard operating procedure?
They're going to have to adjust to my habits, right? Because what happens is business owners don't come to me when things are good, right? They all come to me when things are bad, right? And that's the problem. So, like, people always think, right? Like, oh, if the economy is doing good, that's great for business. Not in my case. The economy is doing good and people are spending money and doing well. They kind of go without, and they kind of think, like, I don't need an account. I'm doing well enough, right? One of the biggest misconceptions in business is that business owners operate at a level where if I can make payroll and I can pay myself, I'm doing okay. And that is the furthest thing from the truth, okay? Because what happens is they're not taking a look under the hood to see what's actually transpiring. They're looking at their bank account and they say, okay, I have $200,000 in the bank. I'm okay. I can make payroll and pay myself. And they're not looking at 4 weeks down the road. They're not looking at what's coming ahead, right? They're not looking at their financials to kind of see if they're even making money. They're just looking to see if their bank account says positive. And then when they take a look under the hood, and what happens is when they come to us, when they start to see that cash balance going low, and they can't pay themselves the salary that they want to anymore, and they're saying, what's happening right now? Why isn't this working anymore? Because you've been flying blindly, right? So they come to us when things are bad, and in order for this to work, they have to conform to our style. And listen, some of them don't, and we go our separate ways after a little while, right? We realize this isn't a good fit, and majority do conform to our ways. And we're not the Gestapo. We're not going to tell you, we're putting you on a budget and you got to follow X, Y, and Z. No, we're going to implement changes where we need you on your team to do your part so you can get us the data that we need in order to recommend the changes that we can see. Well, you're only as good as your data, right? And that's half the problem with a lot of internal businesses is they don't take value on the data. They're not getting the right data in. And what happens is when they're accessing their financials and they're looking at what's going on in their business through their numbers, half the time they don't have the right numbers. And I tell you that because when I get a client and I say, okay, give me your QuickBooks, right? Or give me whatever accounting system you're using. Let me take a look at your books. And when I take a look at their books, they're awful. I have clients where they say, oh, how long is it going to take me to get onboarded, where we're fully operating? 4 to 6 months sometimes. That's average, because they just come to us with such terrible books. And I'm like, how did you operate your business this long, And then once we get them under control, it's it's like on autopilot, because we're not doing manual. We work smart, not hard here. You know what I mean? We automate as much as we can, and we're not doing, when I say that, we're not doing redundant work, meaning like data entry, doing manual reconciliations, right? Like manually inputting bills, like stuff that takes hours and hours. That stuff takes away from me giving you the value that you need, right? So as much as I leverage technology, I will find the next best thing when it comes to technology, utilize that, and then that way I could spend all my time accessing my clients' needs and getting all the correct data through this technology and providing them with, great service, that will keep them going for years ahead.
What's your opinion of life insurance when it comes to businesses? Does that conversation ever come up with your conversations, or is that's not really a part of what you do with them?
Not really. There's some tools that you can do with life insurance, and I haven't personally. If you never know of anybody, please give me, their name. Not more so life insurance, okay? I know plenty of life insurance guys, but I more am interested in the gentlemen that offer life insurance trusts, where they use it as an investment strategy. There are certain individuals out there that have a certain skill set where you could invest in a life insurance trust that you could borrow against, technically, right? Which there are plans like that, but they use it as a loophole for tax purposes and investment purposes, where they create a style where you basically don't lose your principal. It's like a phenomenal security that you can invest in, but there are like a handful of people in the country that actually know how to do it. So that's the only thing I've seen, that I've been an interest. Other than that, it's been not really.
Oh yeah, ILIT, an irrevocable life insurance trust.
Yes.
Oh yeah,
they're very rare, man. People that know how to do that. I mean, I've watched some YouTube videos on it, and I've been fascinated by it. But then when I ask around or I contact people, nobody does it.
Hey, I'm very unassuming, Sonny. But I also happen to not only am I a podcast host, I'm a chartered financial consultant, a chartered life underwriter, a fellow Life Management Institute, and a retirement income certified professional. So I would love to have a conversation with you soon about those ILITs.
Look at that.
All right, and look, that's perfectly how it worked. Is there a question that I should have asked you that I did not?
No, I don't think so. I think you hit on all cylinders. I was very happy. And you know what? I personally have done a lot of podcasts. I like this kind of, improv, go with the flow, right, type of podcast. I feel like when you try to plan these things out and predetermine what you're going to say, it doesn't really work out too well.
Oh yeah, I've been on both sides of the podcast, the guest and the host, and yes, I prefer the conversational. Let it happen. You got to everybody got to plan until you get punched in the face, right? But especially when you're dealing with a host that wants to find your lane and let you swim in the flow. I've encountered podcast hosts that be trying to ask all kinds of questions that don't seem to align with the specialty of the guest. I rather stay in your lane, and when I see that you're in it, because one thing that I observed about you at the very beginning, you're somebody who shows great gratitude for the people who help them. And your conversational style is I think points to your character, because every level that you got to, you made sure to mention somebody that helped you get there. I don't know if you noticed that, and I don't know if it's intentional, right? Because some people love to say self-made, but and yes, we are all self-made, but only the successful will admit it. And the successful people are the ones who show gratitude and appreciation for the ones who help them out.
Through God and my family. That's the only people that make this possible. And I say that I'm just a vessel, man. Through God, that God is the only reason I have what I have, man. And then through that, he provided me with great people that had paved the way for me, that were messengers that were able to help me see the signs, where coincidences aren't coincidences anymore, and that comes with maturity and experience, right? So, and I have to say, for you as a podcast host, I love how much you listen. Listening is an art form, okay? I just want to say this. I worked in a deli for many years, okay? When I worked my way through school, when I owned my own business, because it was seasonal, right? And I always stayed in the deli business. It was good money. And I had a good friend that owned their own place, and I always worked for him. And so I got to observe the public a lot, talk to people, right? And they always saw me as like their therapist and others, right? Always talking about their problems. But what I would always observe, I worked in a really rich area, right? And I would always observe these people coming in and seeing like, oh, there's the Smiths or there's the Kretzes. Let's go talk to them, and I would just hear the conversation. And one thing I would always see is nobody listens to each other. They're all just looking at each other, thinking about the next thing that they're going to say so they can one up what they're doing. Oh, my kid's doing this. Well, my kid's actually here. And I could see it in their eye contact and everything. Nobody's just... They're always rebuttaling, right? They're never just saying remembering what this person did or asking how this person is. So it's an art form of listening. And that's one thing that I always noticed. And I always said to myself, I'm going to be a good listener. I'm going to listen to people. I'm going to remember if I see a client from 3 weeks ago, or even a friend, whoever it may be, I'll remember to ask them about a problem that they were dealing with. They were talking about 3 weeks ago. And they're always like, you remembered that? I said, yeah. I said, I was listening to you, so I just say that for your purpose and what you're doing. You're a very good listener. And I love how you notice those trends that I didn't even notice within myself. So.
Oh, yeah. Thank you so much for that. And for people who are looking for a good book that helps them actively listen, it's a book called Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss.
I've heard of it.
Oh yeah, he teaches mirroring. He teaches tactical empathy. He teaches I forget the last term that he used, but basically you're empathizing and you're thinking about all the bad things that a person can be thinking about. Go ahead.
1 second. Okay, I want to tell you something, all right? Mm-hmm. So I work with my friend, one of my great friends, Larry Horner, okay? He's a great guy. He's a salesman for a payroll company where I work near me. Me and him work together. He's one of the best salesmen I know. I really like, he just has a great mentality of him, okay? So we talk every day, probably, or every other day we talk on the phone. So I'm texting him. I say, I need a really good book to read, all right? This was Friday at 1:30. I go, Larry, I said, do me a favor, recommend the book for me in regards to sales. Okay, I'm going to show you the screenshot of it. Never Split the Difference.
Absolutely.
Literally, that was 2 days ago. Look at that. And now you just recommended the same book. What are the odds?
Oh, yeah. And what I'll do is I'll definitely get the book. But I'll also... Oh, yeah.
I'm like 20 pages in.
Oh, it's a powerful book. I know you like that story of We Have Your Son, right?
Yes, I was just talking about that with him. I was on the phone with him today, and I go, dude, I started reading the book, and I said, I love that part about how he meets the Harvard professors, and they do that part with I Have Your Son, and his response.
How am I supposed to do that?
Yes. Oh my God.
It's a very powerful book. And what I'll do is I'll send you a presentation that I did recently. It's called How to Network to Your Network and Your Bank Account Work. And what I did was I took a lot of Chris Voss's strategies for negotiating deals, and I applied it to having a meaningful conversation. I'll send you that to check out.
Yeah, please. It's so funny too, because today we had a phone call. We had me, my buddy Larry, and he introduced us to this big local 3 union contractor that just got this job, a $40 million job for 4 years. So he's going to, we had a meeting with him. He wants to use our services. And we were talking about the book. And he said, one thing that I like that he does is to ask them a question that they have to answer no to. He says everybody wants to get the yes reply, right? But he's like, for instance, like if you're providing like accounting, one of the questions he said is, do you think you can run this $40 million job the way you've been running your other jobs and run it successfully? And he told me, like, that's what you should ask him, beforehand. And I guarantee you he'll say no, and that just sets the preface of going. And I did it. And he said, no, I can't run the job like I've been doing. That's why I'm meeting with you today, and it kind of set the tone. And after, he's texting me during the meeting, he goes, great question. He goes, I love it, but he got that from Vaughn.
Oh yeah, and another thing is, when you ask that no question, they're either going to say no, or they're going to say no and correct you, right? And the thing is, either way, you just got a good chemical reaction in their brain. People like to, according to Chris Voss, people like to say no, and people like to correct you. So when you ask a question in that no way, either way you win. And if you don't recall from the top of our conversation, is there nothing that you know now that you wish you knew when you first started? And I asked that question like that because of that Chris Voss book.
Oh, that's so funny, man. Good minds think alike, man. I like it.
Yes, sir. One more time, please let everybody know your name, what you do, and how they can get in touch.
Sure, absolutely, man. So my name is Sonny Grappone, all right, and I am with Precision Accounting and Consulting. We provide outsourced CFO and accounting services for your small business. You can look us up at precisionaccountingconsulting.com, and our number's at the page, or you could schedule a consultation and look up Sonny Grappone right here in Melville, New York, Precision Accounting Consulting. Thank you.
Absolutely. This has been another exciting and informative episode of the Entreprenudist Podcast, the place to hear real entrepreneurs and business owners bear it all. I am your host, Randolph Love III. And as always, don't play with it, stay with it until you make pay with it. If you are listening to our voices on audio, please make sure to check the show notes to get more information on Sonny, as well as click the link to see our beautiful, handsome faces. This is the Entreprenudist Podcast, signing off.